So the session was on ancestry informative markers and breast cancer, and I focus on the idea of heterogeneity within the Hispanic Latino population, making in particular a point that we won't understand much about cancer incidence and etiology in the Hispanic Latino population until we really start thinking about the great diversity in terms of culture, exposures, and genetics within this group that we use one name to refer to.
It seemed from the questions you got afterwards, you and the other panelists, that this particular line of conversation was considered provocative or controversial. Is it just because it's unusual, or is it provocative?
My understanding is that sometimes we don't stop and think, and we do that in research all the time. We start using a category and we use it without thinking. And the same happens to people more in general. People use the term race all the time, and sometimes they don't stop to think, what do I really mean by this? What are the implications of using this word? So I think whenever you propose to take away a word from the dictionary that people use all the time, it's always going to be a little bit questioned and controversial until the point is to make people realize that you're not trying to create a problem for scientists, for example, so they can't use that word anymore. You just want people to think about it, and then if they decide to use it, understand what it means to everyone else. Not only when you have a clear idea of what you mean by that word, but whenever someone writes a paper and it gets published, and everyone in the US sees a title that says breast cancer incidence by ethnicity, what are they understanding that you're doing in your paper? It might be very different to what you're actually doing.
So it's kind of reminding me a little bit about, I just can't help that banging. It's kind of reminding me a little bit about how much more complex it makes things. So we know that breast cancer tumors don't behave the same way and lung cancer tumors aren't homogeneous. So does this make people stop and think like, now I might have to consider a woman's Colombian ancestry versus a woman's Honduran ancestry, or?
Well, I think you're gonna have to ask people. Imagine you're trying to get people to eat healthy at a clinic, and you get people from all over the world. You don't want to say, "Oh, she's from Latin America. I know she eats meat." That's not a good approach. You're gonna say, "Okay, can you tell me about your diet?" And that person might say, "Well, I come from my community, for example, really likes meat. And so we eat meat every single day, and it's part of how, I grew up." So then you do your intervention there, taking into account that this person is saying, "This is part of who I am." And then you don't take that, and then the next person that comes and says, I'm Latina, must be the same issue, and you start talking to them assuming the same understanding applies to the next patient. So when the precision medicine concept that everyone uses so much, I think it not only means finding new drugs that work better in this individual or other, but really be able to communicate with people and understand what are their habits, what's their context, where do they live, what are the possibilities, what things might not be useful for that patient given where they live, all these details. And so not generalizing, not putting everyone in a bag in terms of culture or race and ethnicity. I think it really should be part of precision medicine.
So, Alan says our two guiding principles are precision medicine and precision public health. This seems to me both of those.
Yes. So
Did you say that in a statement?
Yeah, so I think discussing the use of terms that group people together, like race and ethnicity, it's relevant both for precision medicine and more understing it in maybe a more biological context, and also precision health or precision public health, which has to do with how do we change policy around health, taking into account the uniqueness or diversity within individuals and not just thinking of these large groups as homogeneous.
So why are those terms so limiting? Hispanic, Latino, they're not interchangeable. A lot of people think they are interchangeable. And why are they so limiting? Who's being missed?
Yeah, so what is happening is that we are, so Hispanic includes the people from Spain, while Latino it doesn't. And when we're trying to understand breast cancer, we're really trying to understand in Latin America. And when we talk about Hispanics or Latinos, we mostly mean the Hispanic Latino population that is in Latin America. We're not referring to the people from Spain who moved to the US, for example. Those people share more of their genetics and their culture with people in their own continent, with all their differences. And so when we look into a huge region, as is everything below the US, we are encountering absolutely diverse populations. And when we say Latinos, for example, those who are not well aware of the difference between groups, they start assuming that these are all the same, like it's an homogeneous whole. People in Latin America, they all eat tacos, or people in Latin America, they all dance. Those kind of general comments are what people end up creating in their minds when we don't refer to things properly. For example, people recognize countries as some sort of unit that makes sense. We say the US, it's one country, with Canada is another country. You don't say, let's look at the difference of the incidence of breast cancer in North America and include Canada and the US in the same statistics. You don't. You divide them into countries. So if that's a relevant measure, then let's do that for Latin America. And then within countries like we do for the US, we can even divide regions in the country or populations within the country. So you can say the incidence of breast cancer in the population of Argentina with more European ancestry is such and such. If that is the relevant variable in your research question.